Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. Like they said, my name is Peter Pessoa. I'm Managing Director and Partner at BCG. I'm excited to be here with our panelists. Today, we'll be discussing AI. I think for all of you, it's no surprise. AI has been changing the world and continues to change the world. That has only been accelerated with the introduction of generative AI. And we see it changing everything from customer service to customer experience, hyper-personalized marketing, reimagining your internal processes. And we'll be discussing all of that today. We'll also be discussing the challenges, not only the challenges around kind of responsible AI, but also the challenges in actually implementing it. So where is the value in AI? How do you actually go after it? How do you think about how that impacts your people, your processes, your recruiting processes? With that, we'll go ahead and jump in. We'll keep this as an open discussion among the panelists. And would like to start with Sebastian. So the first thing I'd like to start talking about is a little bit around the difference between what people are now calling traditional AI and generative AI, right? And I think I would love it if you help ground us and the audience around how are you thinking about using both of those at Mercado Libre? Where are you thinking about traditional AI? Where are you thinking about generative AI? And where are you seeing kind of those two interplay as well?
Perfect. Happy to. I think the easiest way to describe the difference is traditional AI, which is still pretty advanced, but now that we have something new, it's a new term that we can use, was basically limited to simple outputs. You could do very useful things with simple outputs. So if you think of, okay, the output is going to be a single number from 0 to 100, well, that can be a credit score or whether content is harmful and should be removed from a platform. Which we've been using for a really long time in many companies for even decades, I would say, even before it was called AI, could be applied statistics or then machine learning, and the terms evolved, but the technologies stay pretty similar. The big change with what's new now is that the outputs are very complex. The outputs can be text, the outputs can be images, the outputs can be videos, music, and this really opens up a whole new ability to create experiences, to optimize processes, and I would say that's the difference for us.
Great. And where are you using generative AI most?
So we're using it both internally and externally. Before the panel, we were actually talking about some of the risks of using it externally, especially because it's still an open area of research, like how you ensure these models are not hallucinating, as the word is not being used, or just making up information. There have been advances, and I'm sure we'll eventually get there. The other side of it is I've heard these things are trained based on human output, and humans are also hallucinators, or we can sometimes make stuff up. So maybe it's not even something that we can ever get rid of, and it's just something that we have to learn how to adapt to and prevent. But the main use cases, I would say, are around, yes, customer service is a typical one that you hear a lot about, but personalized experiences is another big one. We have many millions of products, so for us to give you a personalized message that knows about your behaviors and what products you're looking at and how you best respond to messages is only available now with these new technologies.
Great, thank you. And Lucia, so on generative AI and AI, I mean, you're using both as well.
Yes.
Would love to hear a little bit about where you're using them and how do you see it impacting Latin America in particular over the next kind of 5-10 years?
So as Sebastian explained, well, we have been using traditional AI for decades, right? I think one very important thing for the payments industry, it is to keep our infrastructure protected. So where do we use it? We use for personalized shopping experience to improve any customer interaction in the point of sales. And we also use to protect that infrastructure. So you guys have heard in the panel before, cyber attacks are every day bigger and more impactful. We used to protect for fraud in the payment industries. We use to make sure that you can prove your identity. And I think a big difference, even though we have been using this technology for 10 years, it is the amount of data that we go now and the velocity of the data, because all those points of interaction has to be real time. And as the world is going digital, the amount of data that we have to deal with is gigantic. Just to have an idea, in a given year in Mastercard, we see about 125 billion transactions, and that's what we use to take a response. So what we have seen in LAC, I want to talk a little bit of the context of LAC. Recently, we saw very much a huge financial inclusion of the population, driven to all the new banks and the wallets that we have in place. So what does it mean? It means that we have about 45% of the population that still use just cash. Now it's just 21%. On top of that, the penetration of mobile in LAC is gigantic. 80% of the population has mobile, and they are willing to use their mobile to open an account or to do a payment method. So the focus on creating trust in this ecosystem is the most important thing for us. This is for the entire globe, but especially for LAC. Unfortunately, we have been fighting fraud. Fraud has been reduced quite a bit, but it's still the region with the highest amount of fraud. And I wanted to give an example of how we use it. I have a tool that I love it because it just not only uses AI, but it also uses our global footprint. Mastercard is in 210 countries. We have about 3 billion cards transactions every single day in our network. So to be able to see what's going on in the world, because the other side of the equation is also using AI, and to prevent massive fraud attack is very important. Because if you have protection just in your local system, you're not going to be able to see it. So we are able to monitor, see it, and protect every single one of our clients. Just to give you an idea, up to now, closing the Q3, we protect about $50 billion in fraud, right? Denying authentication. Last year, the entire year was about $13 million of fraud. That fraud is about 10, of that number, about 10 or 15%, it happens in Latin America.
Wow, amazing, thank you. So Paul, I would love to go over to you and think a little bit about, so we're talking about AI, generative AI, we're talking about data, the amount of data and what you can do with that. You know, one of the big macro questions before we start getting into specific use cases is around responsible AI, right? I think your role is one that's very unique to that. I mean, you spend all your time thinking about it. So could you help us, how do you think about the right ethical guidelines, the right questions to ask when people are responsibly building and using AI technologies? And the second part of that question that I would love is, which risks do you think are really real and which ones do you think are red herrings, right? That people are blowing out of proportion.
Oh, how much time do you have?
31 minutes.
Well, I'm curious, let me ask, can I just get a show of hands? Like, how many of you are using generative AI in your businesses right now? Okay, and then how many of you are exploring or interested? Okay. Let me start, I guess, with a couple of thoughts. So just by way of background, so Salesforce creates a number of, predictive AI products as well as generative AI products for like similar things as Sebastian was talking about. It could be for people's own online shops and product descriptions. It could be for personalized sales, personalized service, all of that kind of stuff. And we're in touch with businesses from small enterprises to very, very large ones. And what I would say is, while there's a public discussion that talks about everything from the risk of biased outcomes to the potential that AI will overtake human beings in the long-term future, and without discounting any of those topics, I think what business really needs to focus on is the here and now. And the management of the risks in interactions, particularly with generative AI right now. And let me just highlight a few of them. We recently put out a set of, we have trusted AI principles, as I imagine my peers do as well here on this panel. We recently revised them for generative AI, because we realized we needed to keep pace. And we put out also a new AI acceptable use policy. And a lot of that effort in conjunction with our customers is how do you make sure that the output is reliable? So things to look at when you're considering generative AI solutions. How strongly can you constrain the answer to the question that's being asked, right? So there's a technology technique called grounding, where you're saying to a model like, hey, I have 100 knowledge articles that I know are trusted about how my business works. If you can't find the answer to the question in these 100 knowledge articles, like, don't answer. Or can I get citations in a service environment if like you have a customer talking to a chatbot and saying, hey, can I get a refund? You definitely don't want the chatbot saying yes if your policy is no, right? So can you cite the answer? Do you have signals of how truthful the answer is? So honesty and accuracy, I think, are potentially the most important topics for businesses today that are considering generative AI. I will also say there's questions around toxicity and bias, right? So in a service capacity, you definitely don't want, let's say you're having a service interaction with a customer that's upset about something, and they say something that might be a little offensive, you definitely do not want a chatbot responding with something repeating the language, yeah, right? And these are the types of things that when you're looking at these types of solutions that we're looking out for. So I would say those are the most important things for businesses right now. And the good news is that those solutions are getting better and better, even as the technology is getting more and more complicated.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, so we've been talking a little bit about more macro things, right? Responsible AI, generative AI, traditional AI, et cetera. Let's start getting into where AI is driving value. Where are you seeing it either kind of in your partners or in your own company? Would love to start with Ana Luisa and then just kind of go down. What are the high value kind of ROI use cases? And if you've seen any that you say, hey, this is also a red herring, things to avoid.
Yeah, so for us, the traditional AI and everything that we do around fraud and cyber, it is very valuable, right? Even if you don't have an attack, I think just the insurance of really protecting your name and your name brand, it pays off. What I've been seeing now with our clients that everybody's really trying to invest in Gen AI, and ourselves included. But for the same reasons that you had described, at least we are being very cautious, right? And two use cases has been like top of mind for everybody is how can we serve our customer better? How can we have a more personal interaction with those clients? As well as how can I improve efficiencies within my own functions, right? So for example, at Mastercard, we already have proof of concept with customers to serve them better, as well as we have a lot of proof of concepts to see how can we use our data knowledge in a better way, more efficient way, how can we optimize our sales effort, right? Making sure that we have a more personalized set of information to be able to talk with our clients.
Yeah, I would echo similar themes. I think personalization is really the name of the game. And whether it's in sales, service, commerce, marketing, I think the potential of both predictive and generative AI combined is game changing for massive increases in the personalized customer experience. And that just, if you'll permit me an aside here, AI is as good as the data, right? And so the more of a trusted, personalized experience that you give to your customers, the more data they're willing to give you, the better the personalized experience, and it becomes this virtuous loop, right? That's really, I think, where we're seeing tremendous progress. And honestly, I think if we look back at this conversation in 5 years, we'll be like, oh yeah, we were babies, right? This is advancing so quickly that this is really the time to be taking sort of calculated steps forward in this domain, I think, regardless of industry.
For us, obviously, very similar, anti-fraud, personalization. So I'll also give you some other useful examples. Because maybe some of your companies were talking about like mining or oil, no, that maybe you don't have to personalize the customer experience. But all the process automation that happens inside the company. So one of the bigger ones that we've seen is generating code, no? Instead of generating just any text or images, helping our developers program faster, basically writing emails in a better way, generating presentations. So if you imagine your entire workforce now spending 30%, 40% less time on those text generation tasks, I can see, I'm a very optimistic person, a big boom in productivity all throughout the market.
Code is a really important
Yeah.
Thank you for mentioning.
Yes.
Yeah, we've been spending a lot of time on code generation as well and developing models in that regard, and it's super, super interesting. Even just to back up and think about the implications of that. 5 years ago, I think in tech, one of the mottos was like, teach everyone to code, right? You know, everybody start early.
It'll be the last job to go out to computers and automation.
Exactly, and so it's what we're seeing is sort of flipping all of our assumptions about the implications of AI. But yes, we're seeing massive advances of not only the ability for AI to generate code, but for AI to catch problems in code earlier. So for example, I'm responsible at Salesforce for the accessibility of our technology. So making sure that people with disabilities can use the technology. And code models are catching problems so much earlier, right? Like think about the impact to those people that depend on assistive technology for them to do their jobs. It's really incredible. It just makes me really optimistic about what AI can do.
I think it's going to change the way that we educate people,
Yeah.
right? And I think it's going to give access to many people that did not have access before, right? Because somebody that cannot read and write, they can be educated in a topic now just by listening, right? So it's amazing what can it do.
No, I mean, I'll just pile on to that. I mean, we're seeing it in using AI and generative AI to kind of make your employees, quote unquote, bionic, right? Is taking your bottom performers, improving their performance by about 40%, right? And so you've gotten rid of your bottom performers, and it's taking your top performers and improving their performance by 14%, right? So, I mean, just so what you can do with that type of workforce, I think is amazing. Now, whenever I have these discussions with my clients, one of the first things they tell me is like, that's great, my data is horrible. I can't do anything about the data. So I'd love to kind of shift the conversation a little bit to kind of data quality, but also data governance. And so, Paula, would love to start with you there, right? How do you think about, data quality, data governance, given that it's at the heart of everything, and Salesforce being at the heart, like the CRM being at the heart of many companies' kind of, data?
Yeah, absolutely. No, and it's a really, really important topic. So you can kind of think about the topic as what goes into the system and what goes out. So we talked a little bit about the safeguards that are really important for what goes out, right? So how do you, constrain the output of the AI to trusted responses? What goes in, obviously, also deeply important. And I know that there's a range of maturity levels in terms of data governance across the business world. The truth of the matter is that what we call zero-party data, not just first-party data, like you're capturing what's going on with your interface, but zero-party data, like your customers trust you so much they're telling you about themselves. That is the kind of the gold star. That's the most valuable data. But there are easy ways to get started in getting data governance going, right? Some of them have to do with just like, thinking about data labeling, about keeping data fresh, about deleting data that might be old and erroneous so that you're not wasting money sending marketing to someone's address that's no longer active, that kind of stuff, right? So there's simple ways to get started in a variety of data governance systems. And I think the challenge that we often see is like, how do people piece together legacy systems so that they can, have a unified view of their data across these different lakes, so to speak.
I mean, and Lucia, you have, like you said, how many billion transactions a year? I mean, the amount of data that you're managing is massive. Like, how do you think about data governance in that size of system?
So what we did in Mastercard, we started by really being responsible and setting principles, right? What do we want to do? Because in the end, it's consumer data. So, and we know that that data belongs to the consumer. So that's the first principle that we have. The data belongs to the consumer. We have to secure it. Mm-hmm. We have to be accountable for it. So anything go output has to be customer-centric, right? It has to be focused on improving, benefit that consumer or benefit the society. We have to be able to be very much responsible for biases information. So really we put those principles in place to permeate everything that we do in Mastercard, and we have to follow by that. That's our guardrails, right? And we are going to innovate within that. On top of that, we create an AI council that is multidisciplinary. So we have our chief data officer, our chief data privacy officer, our AI head, all being part of this council, and they overlook everything that we do from product development to product delivery. Everything that we do now has to go and pass through that institution. So that helped, right? And when we think about data quality, I mean, our data is pretty much standardized and code and clean. But fact is, a lot of our products, sometimes we use the third-party data. We use public information data. We co-create with clients. We use client data, right? So I think when I think about data quality, which is extremely important, it is not a destination, but it is a journey. You have to have all the process in place to be able to always keep the data updated, refreshed. And in the end, whatever you are doing, you have to say, what is the business problem that I'm trying to solve? Do I have the right data set that is not biased, that is complete to solve for that business problem, right? So you don't need to have everything in place at once, but everything that you're going to solve for, it has to be of extreme great quality.
I think that's an excellent point, right? Start with business value. What's the business outcome? What's the data I need? And you don't need everything at once.
No, it's a journey.
It's a journey. That's great. Sebastian, so you guys at Mercado Libre are doing what I think is, for many companies, kind of like the holy grail, right? Like just AI at scale, right? Like you really have an at scale capability to drive AI, not only kind of, and experiment and innovate, right? I would love for you to share with the audience a little bit of what does that look like, right? How did you get there? What does that look like? And what is not only the structure and the operating model that allows you to do that at scale?
Absolutely. It's one of those things that might sound, yes, like the Holy Grail. There's still a lot to do. I wouldn't say we're completely satisfied with where things are at the moment, but it's something that we've been building for many years, even over a decade, I would say. It involved really committing as a company to artificial intelligence, to machine learning, to having the clean data, to have the data of governance, data provenance, acquisitions. We acquired 2 AI-focused companies. So it was not just a thing we were saying, it was a thing we were doing, putting money on the table for it to happen as well. And similar, I would say, even to our sort of like logistics network that we've built over many years, and it involves heavy investments. We've done the same in AI with large teams. We're building internal infrastructure that's only used for training, for experimentation, for monitoring models. So we have a pretty sophisticated internal AI platform team that's dedicated to building the scaffolding and all the abstractions that we provide to our own developers. So they don't have to worry about the small details or where this will run, and hopefully they'll worry about how much it will cost. But even there, we try to make it very easy for them. So they can just focus on where are we adding value, what experience are we going to run, what are the new architectures that are coming up on the industry that we want to try, and everything else we take care of for them.
Right. Anything to add? No? All right, so for me, one of the destination of AI at scale, right? Like you turn around, you see it, it's great. I think what's difficult for a lot of people is like, what are the steps? How do I get there? One of the key parts of getting there is talent, right? How do I identify the right talent? How do I bring them in? How do I not only attract them, but then retain them? I would love if we turn around and start with you, Paula, on how do you think about, with you and Lucia, how do you think about identifying the right talent, bringing them in, building that over time, and particularly what is the setup for you at Mastercard?
Yeah, so as a tech company, we want all the technologists and data science to be attracted and to have to work with us. And it's a multifaceted, I think, strategy, right? First of all, we have tech hubs and AI hubs in about 15 different countries where there is a talent pool that we can use. So we have in India, we have in Sydney, we have in Dublin, we have in New York, we have in San Francisco, we have in Costa Rica, in Latin America, just focus on data analytics, right? So having those hubs in places that we know that there is a talent pool is one first focus. The second thing, I think, is exactly what Sebastian said. We have been doing a lot of acquisitions, right? So we have been growing through acquisitions. We do not acquire to acquire talent. We acquire to acquire technology. But with the technology, we acquire a huge human capital. So how do we bring them on board? How do we integrate them in Mastercard and retain those pool of talents? Then a third thing that we also do is how do we educate our current talent? So we don't believe in sending everybody back to school for 4 years because then the technology also is going to be outdated. So we do a lot of partnerships with universities so they can come to our hubs and train our current employees. And last but not least, we are doing a lot of partnerships with governments as well. We just create an AI hub in Dubai, right, to be able to unleash innovation and to help to form talent pool in countries as well.
Okay. To change, so we've talked about use cases, value, data. We've talked about talent, doing this at scale, right? Now, BCG went back and we analyzed all of the digital transformations we've been a part of. And when we turn around and we looked at it, rough numbers, about 10% is tied to kind of data, 20% tied to your IT, technology, algos and such, and 70% of it is tied to the actual people, the processes that have to change, the people have to change the way in which they do things and work. So Paula, I mean, in your role, right, you think about people and AI all the time. 100%. How do you think about that? Like, fine, I've got a great recommendation, personalized recommendation for this customer at this moment, but like, how do you start getting people to change the way in which they work, particularly in an environment where some people are even scared that's going to impact their job?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Well, I think the stats that you just cited are really powerful, right? The way that AI will work magic for businesses is not just the technology itself, it's the technology and the people. I think that point cannot be underlined enough. And it's really important as we're developing AI technology that we think about it in that way. It's like, how does it augment people? Now, let me just sort of break this down a little bit. I think the point that you're making about disruptions to the job market and to the labor market is really important and really serious. And I don't think should be underestimated in any way. I will also say, I think in the long run that I'm optimistic that AI is going to create a whole bunch of new opportunities and new professions that we can't even dream of right now. Again, that takes nothing away from the need for all of us as businesses to be creating pathways for these types of new jobs, for creating pathways to empower people to be nimble with these markets, and even for governments to do the same, right? But what I would also say in the micro is that the success of AI solutions that we adopt within our businesses depends on the extent to which we empower two things. How much do we empower our employees to experiment to think about how AI is going to be used most effectively? And number two, how do we create values that override all of that as a matter of culture, not as a matter of dictate, right? But I will tell you that like one of our superpowers, I think, in recruiting for Salesforce for our AI talent is that we're a mission-driven company, and we wear our values on our sleeve, and that's part of why we're able to attract really great talent. And it's not just like coming from one corner of the company. But the second thing is we get in there, and like especially now, especially with like this year when we're talking about all these the generative AI experimentation that's going on across the industry, we saw from across the company employees saying like, can I use it for A? Can I use it for B? Can I use it for C? And we knew we had some trust questions. Like for example, we needed to know like, are we using critical business data, and who's going to be able to see that data, and what controls do we have, and all of that kind of stuff. But we created a way to like nimbly review all of that and then say yes. And those are the types of things that create the business process improvements that you can't necessarily think of from the top down, because these are the people that are seeing it every day. These are the salespeople that are saying like, hey, it took me 2 days to get an approval. If we made this little change, we could do it in 20 minutes, right? And I think the importance of the people understanding, that your employees knowing where AI is going to make the most difference cannot be overstated.
I love what Paula said, because it's not about people versus technology. It's technology with people, right? So one of the business that I have in the offer of the business that I take care of is consulting. And consulting traditionally was based on a human interaction. Mm-hmm. So how do we do consulting now? If I have to do a cyber consulting, I use AI to view all the vulnerability that a company has. And you have much more time for the human interaction to explain how that's going to be used, to facilitate how that's going to be applied, right? So I think we cannot lose track of that. And when we think about Gen AI, we are trying to mimic the human interaction, right? So I think we are going to have more time to innovate, to think, to bring results.
I would only add that the technology is so new that even getting people to understand what it's capable of is worth it. So one thing we did that might work for your companies is we stopped for a whole day, the whole company, to do a hackathon of AI ideas. So we shared all the tools, all the safeguards, all the data protection and whatnot, but basically then within that sandbox, people could run free and create new ideas. Because it's also like, from high up in your executive chair, maybe you don't see where all the opportunities are as well. So it's a top-down and bottom-up process where we say, okay, we have these ideas. What ideas do you have? And we have great participation, and we have literally hundreds of initiatives that we're working on that came from that hackathon experience. So just getting people involved in it is really helpful.
I love it. I mean, it's great because it's talking to kind of how you become a yes culture, obviously with the guardrails in place, but that's what allows a company to move quickly, to be nimble, to kind of evolve, adapt, innovate. So I think that's excellent. Okay, so we've got a few minutes left, and what I'd like to do is just go into kind of a couple rapid fire questions. So ask the question, and each one of you answer from kind of your perspective, okay? So we'll start with Ana Luisa, and then we'll come back and forth. So the first one, one word to describe, and you can go more than one, okay. The future of AI in Latin America in particular.
I'm glad that I can use two.
You can use much
because
more.
There is a trade-off here. I think transformative, but also responsible.
Can I say ditto? I'm gonna steal it. I'm sorry. That was good.
I think optimistic is the word I would use.
All right, so I would love for all of you to say, what is the biggest AI misconception that you'd like to dispel?
I'll start because I'm sure we were thinking about the same one, because you mentioned it on AI taking jobs away. Maybe in the very short term it happens, but all throughout human history, industrial revolutions, and we come up with new jobs and new things to do. So I think it raises the bar, but it doesn't really remove things.
Yeah, I would add to that. I would say I think the narrative has been AI versus people as opposed to AI with people. And I think both in terms of what we just talked about, like to be able to take advantage of AI, you have to empower your people. And then also to mitigate the risks of AI, you need to empower your people, right? Like, I think it's all about AI and people together.
I think one thing is that when we think about risk, we think about a regulation, right? How can we regulate it so that we don't incur in any risk? I would say that we just need to really have guiding principles and governance established in the company. I think that's the first thing. If anybody's gonna start, that's the first thing where I would start, right? Once you have that guardrails, then you can explore innovation.
I love that because I don't think, the idea shouldn't be zero risk, right? Everything you do has risk involved. It should be measured risk and not use risk of changing the status quo as a reason not to move forward.
Exactly.
I think that's excellent. Okay, so what is the most exciting AI project currently underway at your organization? And we'll start with you, Paula, because you're kind of getting stuck in the middle here.
I know, but I kind of like the middle because it gives me time to think. If you don't mind, I'm gonna cite two things. One, I'm gonna go back to code generation just because I think if we get effective code, we can make it as inclusive as possible, and I'm just really care about that personally, especially for people with disabilities. Second thing I would say is we're working on these kind of autonomous co-pilots that were basically multi-purpose to help you in your everyday jobs, right? And to help customers interact with you. And I think as we think about moving from applications with human in the loop to applications that can work on their own and have safety measures built in, I'm really, really excited about that.
For me, it is a hub that we call AI Garage that we put in India, where our data scientists are working together with clients, right? Of course, I mean, our focus is a lot of building trust in the ecosystem. How can we ideate and improve? But I like the collaboration of them working together, and I like the fact that it was created a place just for us to experiment.
I think for us, the most exciting one is still confidential. but it's basically around how these new ways of interaction can transform how you shop, how you even ask for financial advice, financial education. I think the concept of a co-pilot, no? But how does that apply to e-commerce, to fintech? We're working on exciting things there.
And if I might just draw out a thread there, like to me, the most exciting thing to me personally to think about as the future of AI is this notion of human AI interaction and how you, with design and responsibility in mind, empower people to know how to interact with AI. I think that's going to be so important, and there's so much you can do with it. So,
Sebastian, we'll start with you again for the next one. What is an AI technology or tool that you can't live without?
So you mentioned code generation. That's one that I don't program as much as I used to. But when I still do, I do rely on a lot of AI tools to help me navigate the code, to generate it, to even have a sort of a research partner. That's the other big one, where part of my job, or a big part of my job, is understanding new technologies, how they relate to each other, how we can use them in the business. Just like having a partner where I can ask a lot of questions, get information. Hey, what are interesting new papers that I can read about X or Y? So that's the one for me.
I will say I've started experimenting a lot with text generation stuff in my day-to-day work, and you can imagine, chief ethicist, like I have to think about a lot of complicated things that might be sensitive. How do I write them? And just getting like a little bit of help is really just like speeds up the process quite a bit.
Yeah. For me, it's everything that we developed to be able to prove identity, right? So I'm thinking about, first of all, how to improve the interaction in the digital world. But really, when you do a transaction, I think about that we think that transactions that goes in very little second, they know that you are you. They see that the email that you are interacting with is your email. They see the angle that you hold your cell phone to be able to go to an approval of that transaction, and I think it's super cool. I think about all the technology that goes behind, right? Something that you just swipe a card, or just use a cell phone every day, and is an amazing amount of technology.
Okay, last question. So to the audience here, what is your top advice for Latin American executives looking to embrace AI? Who wants to go first?
I'll go. And I would repeat what we've already said. Start with a set of principles, a set of values. They can evolve over time. And then jump in with experiments that grow.
I would say there's a lot of hype, so be careful about the hype. But in this case, a lot of it is justified. So definitely big things coming, and it's worth paying a lot of attention to.
I would steal shamelessly what Paula said, start with principles and governance, and then go and experiment.
Well, thank you very much, everybody, for the time. That's it.
Thank you.